before on that video, I'm gonna go to something else, so you can go watch it on my Facebook page. So I have these two Thomasville pieces here, two side tables that I really like. They are really pretty pieces, and I was excited about them being Thomasville. So it has, as you can see, it's a French provincial legs, and when I got them, I kind of wanted to keep the era of these two pieces. And as I started cleaning them, well, actually, my boyfriend that is in the business with me, he actually cleaned them and sanded them, and we bleached the tops of it. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna leave them like this. It just depends on how this comes out. So today I wanted to talk about how to add dimension with your pieces using stencils, and you can have texture without using any additives. So you can have a smooth texture using paint and adding dimension using stencils. So this is actually a piece, one of the side tables that I actually used. Let's see, it's Wise Owl paint using a limestone, and I also mixed a warm gray, which is gray linen, and I put a snow owl with it. I think about a 50-50. I don't really measure anything. I just kind of add it as I go and stir it and shake it. And what I did was I used these two chip brushes, and I cut them to kind of get them frayed, and I wash them really good so all the extra bristles are out and it doesn't go in the piece. And I like to, if I mix anything or if I'm going to use it and go back and forth, if I'm doing a few different steps on here, back and forth, I usually like to use this tray, and I'll put paint on it, and I'll just wrap it so it'll keep it from drying out. And I also have gilding paint by Wise Owl, which I really like. It's copper, and I'm using the pearl by Wise Owl. So all this I'm using is by Wise Owl paint. So these are the chalk synthesis line that I'm using today. And so what I did was, after I cleaned and prepped them, of course, I used the two different colors. So I did a base coat of the mix of the gray linen and the snow owl that I did, and then I went back with the mix of the gray linen and snow owl, and I just stiffled it. And I used two brushes, and used one brush for the limestone and one brush for the gray linen mix that I had, and I just stiffled it. And so I wanted to kind of blend together, but I didn't want to mix the colors to where you couldn't see it. So you always want to make sure you keep your brushes a little dry from the paint, so they don't get muddy together whenever you go along. So I will probably do a video on stiffling and eventually. So whenever you use the brushes, you just kind of go and use a little bit of paint and just stiffle it around. There's no rhyme or direction or reason, just any way you feel free. So these two pieces are really, I wasn't sure after that what I was gonna do, and then I saw this stencil that I had, okay, and I really liked the design of it. It made me think a little bit of old world wallpaper texture, maybe wrought iron, and it just kind of made me think of this design, and like it went together. So I decided to use a stencil on here. So I first went with the copper stencil, okay? I went with the copper stencil, and as you can see, let me see if I have it. As you can see right here, it doesn't look good, and I'll tell you what, a piece doesn't always look good before you finish it. So as you can see, it doesn't look right like this, but it's not gonna stay like this. So I just did the stencil with the copper, and as you see, I left a little bit of area right here. I should have faded it out a little more, but if you feel like you made a mistake, it's not a big deal. I mean, I always can go back and fix it. So after I did that, I did it with the copper, and then I went back with the, right here, as you can see, I went back with a texture of pearl, and it looks a little bit lighter, but when you get close, you can see they have dimension where the pearl gilding paint is over the copper. So it gives like a 3D dimension, almost like a shading effect. Okay, so a lot of people ask me about stencils and how to get them on, and let me tell you, trust me when I tell you, my first time I use stencils, I have to do it over and over and over again. But I kept doing it until I got it right. So one of the tricks, first of all, using tape. I got this from many of the artists that I watch a lot and learn from. One of them showed me how you can use a piece of tape, and when you tape it off, you lay it on something and then you rip it off and then you use it. That way you don't rip off your paint or whatever paint you might have just painted on top of it. So it stays, so your paint stays on the piece a lot better. So I'm just gonna show you a little of how I did the copper stencil. In my other video, I just used the pearl over the copper. So, of course, I don't have the brush. I'll be right back. So, as a makeup artist, brushes to me are very important. When I say they're very important, I mean the texture, the stiffness, the sharpness of the brush handle, all that is important. So this one I had a long time ago that I purchased from Dixie Belle. So I really like sponges, but I don't have any flat round sponges. So this brush works really, really well because it's really, really stiff, as you can see. And it's kind of a short haired bristle brush with stiff, and it has a dome shape on the top. And you want a little bit of a dome shape if you're doing the stencils, if you decide to use a brush. So whenever you pick up your paint from your stencils, this is the copper. So of course we're going with the copper first, and I'm gonna let that dry before I go over it with the pearl. And I'm gonna leave off any excess. So this is about what I start with. I kind of gauge it by using less because you can always go back over it. So whenever you put it on, you kind of want to go over that spot a few times so that way it doesn't sit or settle or seep underneath the stencil. Okay. So you might start with more than you need, but if you keep going over that piece, then let's see how I'm going to do this stencil. Okay. So I'm going to go in a diagonal with the stencil because I don't want it all stenciled. I want it to kind of be kind of a shade and asymmetrical because I'm going with an old world finish, so it's not meant to be perfect because nothing is really perfect, but I want it to have a little character. And as you can see with this piece above me, that was a custom piece, and so I do a lot of different looks on my pieces depending on the piece itself. I kind of let it tell me what it wants. And this piece, I just kept saying, you know, to keep it its French provincial style, but adding a little bit more to it, a little bit more drama to the piece, but using neutral colors. So I'm gonna pull this off. And it's not gonna be even, but as you can see, I wanted it to be shaded a little bit right here. Now this has more on this side than I wanted to. So what I'll probably do, because I don't want it perfect. So I'm just gonna hold it right here. Like every piece is different that I'm stenciling, but since I'm doing it like not perfect, and it's gonna give more of a shading and fading effect because I'm gonna do different layers. So this is one layer. I'm gonna do another layer of pearl over it to give like a shadow. And then I'm gonna also do another layer of the two base colors that I used over it with a stippling effect. That's gonna give a soft focus, kind of like a worn stone look. With maybe they had a pattern on that stone look somehow, and it just kind of got washed away with nature. That's kind of how I see this piece. And oops. And so I'm going to go in a diagonal pattern as I paint. So I'm gonna start and kind of go in the same spot that I first put it on and just keep stiffening it and going around on the outside perimeter of that piece. Okay. And I want it to look kind of faded, so I'm not gonna add any more paint. Kind of fade in here. And it kind of went over. So I'm not gonna worry too much about that I went over that area, because I'm actually gonna go over it with the paint on top of it. So it's gonna actually look a little more faded anyway. So once that dries, I'll go over with the pearl. Okay, and this is after I added the pearl on top. On with the pearl. Kind of hard to see, but I added the pearl on top, and then I took the stiffer brush and used limestone with one brush on top, okay, and used the mix of the gray linen and the wise owl